New to Dokkan? Then check this out. How's it, everybody? Celtic Link here. We're back for another Dokkan battle video. In today's video, we are kicking off the first episode in a beginner's guide. This has been highly requested by many of you guys, and I figured it's right of me to address it as well for you guys, as well as any new players coming to Dokkan Battle. So we're going to kick things off here in this series of videos, which I'm hoping to release roughly 7 to 10 videos covering all of the basics for Dokkan Battle. The first video will be about the basics of the unit, understanding the typings, the type advantage system, and how all of that works. Our second video will cover unit basics with the kit, basically understanding how a leader skill works, how the unit's super attack and their multipliers work, along with their passives. Then we will jump into the hidden potential system. How does that affect the unit? Finally, we'll end off the unit basics with the link skill system. Once we have an understanding of the full unit, we'll then start talking about team building and how units interact with each other. We'll talk about building a core set of units that would function on a team and then building around them. We'll also, in this video, talk about acquiring new units, either through summoning or through various free-to-play methods. In that, we will also talk about awakening and raising your units with Elder Kais and Awakening Medals. And then finally, on the note of Elder Kais, we will end off with the item and resource management video, where we will talk about how to acquire certain items that will help you raise your characters, to include Elder Kais, training items, and training locations, as well as how to properly manage your resources during some sparse celebrations, leading into those big celebrations where you're gonna pull a lot of units maybe, and you're gonna want those resources. And then finally, once all of that is together, we have an understanding of the units and the units that make up a team. We're going to take on one challenge run with a team of your guys' choosing. So make sure you guys stay tuned in all of these videos in order to participate in that when we get there. So we're going to kick this video off with the unit basics, understanding typings. Shout out to our good friend of the channel, Greg Daw, for this wonderful guide to understanding the basics of unit typings. Many of you guys have noticed, as you have played the game already, or at least loaded up your game, you have seen this sort of type wheel in your upper right corner, right? These represent the various typings, and you'll notice in the circle. Well, that's kind of intentional. They move in a circle that way because that's to tell you that each type plays a certain role on your team, either advantaged or disadvantaged against another enemy type. For example, Fizz typings, units with the orange shading here, are advantaged over Int typings, the purple shading, right? And they are disadvantaged over STR typings, the red shading, basically meaning that they will deal more damage to Int typings while dealing less damage to STR, and taking more damage from STR while taking less damage from Int. And we'll talk more about how exactly those multipliers work out here towards the end of the video. But let's talk about the units themselves, because it's more than a simple type wheel of advantages and disadvantages. Unlike a game like, say, Pokemon, where the type advantage system is more of a rock, paper, scissors-esque aspect, there's a little more to it than that. For example, every single typing unit has a different layout of stats. Whether at 55% or at rainbow status, there is a different layer of stats. STR units and tech type units are actually going to be a tad bit more on the offensive side compared to, say, like a Fizz or an AGL or an Int type unit. So, for example, at 55%, an STR unit would have 5 critical hit added into their 55% passive if you filled in all of their hidden potential nodes. This would give them an extra 5% chance to crit as well. When at rainbow status, an STR unit would have an additional 5,000 points to HP, 5,400 to attack, and 4,600 to defense. On a tech type unit, you have all the same at 55%, and then at rainbow, you'll notice that the HP and the defense are switched. So they are slightly more defensive, than their STR counterpoints, but both can be quite offensive. Some units that really demonstrate this, for example, are the two Carnival LR Gokus. This guy and the LR Super Saiyan Goku from the Cooler movie, right? These two units are the perfect examples of how this works. Both can be extremely offensive based on their natural abilities given the right setup. However, the tech version will lead himself to be more defensive simply by nature of his kit, right? Or not his kit, but being that he is a tech type. If you compare the Fizz and AGL types, they both have an additional 5% chance to do an additional attack. That's what this little thing here means. And that is at 55%. When they get to rainbow status and we talk about the layout of their stats, a Fizz type unit is going to grant you more HP, while an AGL unit is going to grant you more defense. So it's very interesting how these lay out. Basically, every unit has its strengths and weaknesses, or every type, rather, has its strength and weakness. If you're going for a more offensive build, you'll probably lead your team to being more STR or tech related, versus a more defensive build, you may find yourself being more Fizz or AGL. Now, obviously, you know, a good team has multiple different typings, but it's just understanding that the different types serve different roles on the team. Obviously, different kits and different setups, EZAs, can affect the basics of this, but for the most part, this is what you see. An AGL unit or a Fizz type units are going to lead themselves to being defensive while launching additional attacks, where STR and Tech are going to be more offensive, slightly defensive on the tech side, leading themselves to critical hits. Then you have Int typing, who at rainbow status is a straight 5,000 across the board for all. They tend to be more neutral, and they have 5 dodge built in. So 5% chance to dodge built into their 55% hidden potential. So these units tend to be also pretty defensive. Sometimes they're a bit frail, but they do make up for it with their ability to dodge. So that is the basics of the different typings. Like I said, each type has its role to serve in the team based on what you need that for. As Greg notes here, this is typical generalities for units. There are some exceptions that come out during the unit's kits, but if you were just to think in general, this is what the units are used for at the types. The stats here are only for, I should note, and I'm glad he notes this, at rainbow status, these are for summonable SSR units. So any card, TUR to LR, this is their stats at rainbow. Free-to-play units are slightly lower than this. They don't have the full 5,000 breakdown. Unless they're EZA, then that changes. But this is what you can expect from every different typing. Now let's talk about the type advantage wheel. I mentioned each type has a specific advantage over different types. So when we look at the wheel here, right, it's pretty basic, right? You know, Fizz is greater than Ent, so Fizz will deal more damage to Ent. Int will deal more damage to Tech, Tech will deal more damage to AGL, STR, or AGL to STR, STR to Fizz. Reverse the circle, and now Fizz is taking more damage from STR, AGL will take more damage from Tech, and so on. You go the other way, and now you're talking, right, taking less damage instead of taking more damage. So it's pretty basic. The game kind of lays it out for you right there in the tutorial, but sometimes I remember myself early on in the game would find myself forgetting this type wheel and what each type meant and how it affected my gameplay. Now, what do these specific type advantages and disadvantages mean? Now, Greg Dawn notes here that when we're talking about AGL over STR, we're talking about dealing super effective damage for an AGL to STR. Whereas when you're at type disadvantage, your multiplier is slightly different taking that. Now, over on the Dokkan Reddit here, we actually do have an image. Shout out to Noob Legend here for this. This is kind of an older post, but it will help us to understand what these advantages mean. So each type gets a modifier, and you'll notice in-game as you take hits or deal hits what that modifier is. So for example, if we are using AGL versus STR typings, right, we will notice that we have a type modifier of type advantage when attacking, right? So if we are type advantage versus the same class, that means a super class enemy. So if you have a Goku versus a Goku, for example, you are dealing type advantage super effective damage. So it's whatever your damage multiplier is times 1.25%. That is type advantage. Now, if you are attacking an extreme type, super class enemies, your super class allies, if they are all super attacking extreme with type advantage, they are dealing 1.5 times more damage. So you can see how significant it is to want to deal more damage using the type wheel. You want your AGL to deal more damage to the STR and not the other way around, because 1.5 over whatever your damage multiplier is incredibly useful. Now, if you have same type attacks, so for example AGL versus AGL here, the multiplier is slightly different. Type neutral versus opposite class is a 1.15 multiplier. However, if it's super versus super or extreme versus extreme, type neutral is exactly the same, right? The only way you get slightly advantage is if you're facing super versus extreme or extreme versus super, right? Otherwise, your type neutral, AGL versus AGL, for example, is just a flat 1 times multiplier, and it makes no difference. Now, if you were to reverse the circle, for example, and have an AGL attacking a tech type instead of an STR type, a tech type he would be disadvantaged against. Now, when he attacks disadvantage, unless they have a something in their kit, which we'll talk more about later when we talk about generalities of a unit's design, unless they have super effective against all types or critical hit, they are dealing type at disadvantage damage. If it is the same class, then they are dealing 0.9% damage. So you are dealing significantly less damage when you attack an opposing type. Even worse, if you are attacking the opposite type, so if you are a super AGL attacking an extreme tech unit, that unit will activate guard, meaning they have a 0.8 times, you are losing 0.8 times your damage multiplier. So you are now dealing significantly less damage than you were before. Even worse if that unit has guard built in. Now they're dealing even less. So these type modifiers make a huge difference in the amount of damage that you can deal. So it is always important to understand this wheel and where you are in this wheel and what types you should be focusing on attacking. Now again, if your unit has a special ability like being super effective against all types or critical hit built in, those multipliers and those abilities ignore the type system. So they will deal their, what is the crit? 1.5 extra damage, or the super effective against all type, the 1.5 times damage against opposing class. If you're super, actually it doesn't matter. It's 1 point with super effective against all type. It doesn't matter if it's opposing class or not. It's 1.5 all the way around. So again, having those multipliers will really make a difference if you don't have type advantage, but you always want to prioritize having type advantage over an enemy. So if you know a boss is 1 phase and it only has 1 typing, you'll want to bring different types, or you will not want to bring different types. You'll want to bring all 1 mono type. For example, if you are fighting a int type boss, right? For example, a 1 phase int type boss, you will want to bring fizz typings because, as you can see here, they are effective against them. However, Most bosses don't work that way. Most bosses have phases, right, that cycle through the different typings. So you'll make sure, we'll talk more about this in team building, but you do want to make sure that you are bringing a team of the different types so you can cover whatever weaknesses you may have on a specific rotation. But that is the basics of type advantage, right? Again, the key to understanding type advantage is, number one, this wheel. Who does what to what, and who takes what from what. You understand that, you understand the basics. And I really wanted to put this video out before I put anything else out, because I know when I started Dokkan, I don't feel that this was too well explained. I mean, now that version Z out, it's a little bit different, but that wasn't there when I started playing, and I know it can get confusing at times. And understanding the math and how it works also helps you to understand what it is you need to bring on your teams. Again, you do want to have type advantage, or at least type neutral, as much as possible. You do not want to be dealing type disadvantage. That's why it's highly recommended, because not only are you not dealing as much damage, you are taking more damage if you are type disadvantage. So you do want to make sure that you set yourself up for success. So anyways, guys, that is the video. That is the basics of the type system. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this first episode in our beginner series. We will be releasing these videos in the coming weeks, hopefully to have all of them out by Sunday, March 18th. And you guys can continue to check these out, share them with your friends, do whatever you need to do if you got anybody new coming to Dokkan Battle. So hopefully you guys, like I said, enjoy the video. Let me know in the comments down below if I missed anything, or if you want to add anything, or tell me, you know what was your experience first rolling into Dokkan Battle and experiencing the type advantage system. Would love to hear about your initial experience. Otherwise, guys, as always, thanks for watching, and aloha.